a metaphysics of performance, how Lagai distinguishes between the two fundamental categories of performativity and performance. In order to secure an effective starting point for her own construction, Lagai, after some reflection, essentially adopts Butler's categorical distinction on the matter, then in turn draws out the internal watershed in the debate around these concepts, foregrounding the question of the subject's place in the act and in the event, as well as the research perspective vis-a-vis the subject as the dividing line in the understanding of performance on one hand and performativity on the other. Here is Lagai's precise statement, quote, "For whereas performance tended to suppose an acting subject who was performing the performance, performativity, on the other hand, seemed to refer to the performance itself as an acting subject." Note one, Judith Butler makes this distinction quite clear. It's important to distinguish performance from performativity. The former presumes a subject, but the latter contests the very notion of the subject. See also Dolan on this question. Thus, for instance, to speak of a person's linguistic performance or of, say, an orchestra's musical performance is essentially to state something about the person or the orchestra, their ability, brilliance, or weakness in a certain capacity. But to speak of the performativity of language is not primarily to speak about particular person's expression in a language, but to speak of what the language itself does / performs in being spoken, to speak of what its effects are on the world. Yet there is also a sense in which to speak of the performativity of language, and language here is just an example of what has been or can be analyzed in terms of performativity, is to say something about just the opposite, not what people do with language, but what language does with them, with people. Indeed, from the performative perspective, the individual is no longer seen as an omnipotent subject, free and responsible for choosing how to behave, master of his own words. For the powers of language are revealed to extend far beyond the individual speaking subject. Moreover, not only is every individual shown to have been shaped by the language that he uses, but the structures of society and cultural practices provide a framework within which the individual is defined and beyond which he cannot venture. End quote. I bring this issue up for discussion both because question of the subject of power with its sovereignty and mandate is directly dependent on it, and also because the terms of the laying of the intentional subject in terms of performance and performativity may also prove to be kind of litmus test for identifying the divisions between metaphysical and pragmatic thought setting in general. Moreover, the place of the subject in these two distinct perspectives depends on the structure and power arsenal of the single act of speech that is the performative. However, as I analyze this complex and in fact perhaps fundamental methodological issue, I will temporarily adopt the most neutral possible working division of perspectives toward the subject, descriptively calling them the subject considering perspective and the subject neglecting perspective. Constellations of power and authority on such slippery terrain imply instability, fluctuation, and are prerequisite for dialectical combinations of opposites, such as the concept of dual sovereignty noted by Stephanos Geroulanos in Wagner, which I discussed at greater length in my exposition of sovereignty last year. In my broader work, therefore, I also try to strengthen the idea of intermediate path, and to this end, in addition to the thesis of Lagai and its Nietzschean antecedents, I turn to views not belonging to that fault that I find more congenial to such an idea, even without being explicitly articulated as pro-metaphysical. They give an accurate sense of the extent of the split today between approaches that once distinguished themselves as continental and analytic, and more recently, and especially in cultural studies, have been reduced almost exclusively to German and American. These opinions are representative of the process of the bold European expansion into performative zone and the rapid reclamation of a central place for theatricality within it. Although they find a wider place in my work, I will present them here in a highly synthesized form through the brief comments on some of them made by Doris Bachmann-Medic in her work Cultural Turns, where along the lines of my own view and in the spirit of Richard Rorty, this scholar brackets out the linguistic turn and lays it down as the forerunner of all other cultural turns fully accepting its ascribed status by Rorty as the most recent philosophical revolution. I will begin here with Bachmann-Medic's commentary on Gerhard Neumann's thesis. Quote, in understanding theatricality as an implicit element of the textual process and viewing language or text as theatrical because it stages meanings, confirms hypothesis expressed at the start of this chapter. Text and performance need not remain strict dichotomies posited by the humanities. In a lucidly formulated argument, Neumann even emphasizes that on its own, without the support of theater studies, literary studies can contribute to the performative turn. After all, the theatrical implications of language in the literary text or the text as the stage of linguistic performance are obvious. From this angle, Neumann regards the concept of theatricality as a strategic epistemic pattern itself, both as form of thought and a cross-disciplinary element of discourse, end quote. Theatricality as a strategic epistemic pattern is something that is strongly reminiscent of early Nietzsche and which, as a direction of thought and a time of sharing on Neumann's part, almost entirely coincides with the retrospective reference articulated by Lagai. Neumann's expressed and quite widely shared in Germany view of the text as a stage of linguistic performance reaches in Uwe Wirth to a complete identification between staging the utterance and performing the utterance. In Wirth, this occurs in a publication that follows Neumann's by 2 years and Lagai's by 1. I'm not insinuating consequential interconnectedness or borrowing with this information, but merely noting a concentration in the time indicative of a general trend. Here is how Uwe Wirth's view is evaluated by Bachmann-Medic. Quote, Austin's speech act theory played a key role in triggering the performative turn by subjecting its initially language-centered concept of the performative to a cultural studies turn that emphasized cultural performance. The discovery of the performative in cultural studies rests on the idea that utterances can always be seen as stagings, that is, as performances. With this specific staging aspect in mind, we can connect the discovery of the performative in the study of culture to another line of development that led to bursts of performativity, namely to the performative turn in the arts themselves, end quote. To stamp the deep interconnectedness above, Bachmann-Medic again adds to Neumann and Wirth's emphatic announcements Erika Fischer-Lichte. Quote, however, when Erika Fischer-Lichte shifts her attention to the methodological performative turn at the cusp of the 21st century, she places stronger emphasis on theater studies than on textual studies. The new terms that were coined primarily in textual studies during the linguistic turn did not seem well suited for focusing on the special performativity of cultural processes and phenomena. Ever since the 1990s, the field of theater studies has pioneered a new terminology and can more or less claim to the status of a lead discipline in this area. American performance studies seem to differ from German performance studies in this regard because it has turned away from theater studies. C. Carlson. With this new vocabulary, the discipline in Germany has expanded not only the traditional concept of theater, but also the traditional ethnographic concept of ritual. Confronted with the dominance of terms from textual studies, theater studies has thus offered a repertoire of staging concepts, including performance, representation, staging, expression, perception, corporeality, and mediality, end quote. These statements mark the irreducible difference in the directions of conceptualizing the same issues on both sides of the Atlantic. The newly discovered side would certainly view with some irony the claim of theater studies as a leading discipline in the performative zone, except perhaps in the theater departments of some universities, whereas in the German case, judging from the level of commonality, the claim seems perfectly legitimate. I am aware of the difficulty of the above opinions to be accepted unreservedly and unanimously by the analytical school, but at the same time, I find them sufficiently sound, well argued, and defensible to constitute a legitimate starting point and a permanent corrective when embarking on the identified intermediate path. The proposed metaphysics of performance paradoxical as it may be, contains within it a perspective more attuned to practice than even the perspective of pure pragmatic analytics, which, by excluding the intentional subject as a presupposed agent in performance and treating the same as a subjectless medial event, automatically removes from sight an essential part of practice itself, that is, loses the director as agent. The path of synthesis, or the in-between path, would be of key methodological importance in the study of directorial power through speech, insofar as directorial performatives in the interlocutory situation of rehearsal are always deferred in their perlocutionary impact on the ultimate addressees, the audience. If we place the text-fixed written performatives of playwrights written on behalf of fictional characters at the beginning of the complex chain of interlocutions, and place the reassessing and reevaluating interpretive performatives of the directors after them, we find that the latter also rely on subsequent intermediaries to accomplish their communicative purpose. These subsequent mediators, the actors, in turn further mediate the impact of the primary performatives on the final interlocutor addressees. Actors, in turn, while iterating, also reevaluate and modify iterated performatives, see Vatsov, remodulate their power of action in the illocutionary perimeter and substantially influence their outcome in the perlocutionary perimeter as effects in the audience. Thus, to a large extent, actors seize sovereignty over primary performatives. In this line of thought, I am also faced with the larger question of the possibilities of deferring the directorial performative into the actorial performative that follows it, revising it and reevaluating it in iteration. Deferral, not only in the temporal aspect, when the act of actor performance before an audience, the director as the subject of utterance has already disappeared from the temporal vector of interlocution altogether, but also deferral as the transference of a sedimented directorial presence into the actual actor performative, when both the directorial body and the directorial voice are no longer on the map of interlocution, but are present there, somewhat deferred. I venture to pin my hopes on the conceptual propositions of a metaphysics of performance and a production of presence as thought paradigms to help explain the otherwise quite obvious to me presence of a deferred directorial presence that tends to actualize itself in actor performatives with the force of a reincarnated immediate presence. Incidentally, this phenomenon has a direct analog in the unquenchable collective necessity to bodily embody power in a specific person. The collective imagination still fails to emancipate itself from its stubborn tendency to literally embody power in a concrete body by subconsciously reincarnating the supposedly long-dead image of the sovereign and projecting it onto a living individual of flesh and blood. Why and how the modern director often finds herself among these living individuals, and whether this is relevant to metaphysics of pragmatics, I also attempt to clarify within my dissertation. Thank you.
Thank you. Javor Gardev. Okay. I don't know what way we should proceed to put the questions immediately after the presentation or at the end of the panel. I don't know, Professor Vatsov. So I am the moderator, and I have decided to put the questions immediately after the presentation. So, dear colleague, this is time from comments and questions. Please. It is not very easy after such a deep theoretical presentation and argumentation between the artistic practice and philosophical issues. But we are from different special. So, Professor Veltsov.
Find shorter way is main task to summarize the effort. If I understand you well, you're trying to go beyond the deconstructive line of treating the performatives. Maybe for the public, we should repeat that Derrida and after him Butler rework the classical term performative of Austin in a way showing that the performatives are not clearly doing things, but that they have some fictional moment that, if we quote Derrida, they work as if they create reality. And now on the sample of the theatrical directorship or the voice of the director in the theater, you maybe are trying to re-establish the creative power of the performatives. This performative metaphysics or metaphysics of the performative, of the performance, sorry, to quote Lagai, is maybe directed in this direction to return the demiurgic power of the performatives. Am I right?
Basically, yes. I would like to make a little distinction here, which is pretty important. When people come from the field of theater or theatrology, let's say, there's always this tendency, which I find legitimate, which actually claims that doing something in staging or doing something which doesn't necessarily represent reality, but does something in itself on stage is something different from representing, meaning this as if the performatives are producing reality is being questioned, and every one of us actually is trying to melt the distinction between doing as living on stage and doing as living in life. And this is especially reflected in social discourse when, for example, in social and political comments, people usually use theatrical metaphors for implying that theater is something that is not truth, but something other than truth, or it's not the real life, but some other life of representation. So the very tendency of the modern theater, modern director, and all modern constructions of theater thought actually goes against this direction in order to emancipate theater from the field of representation and put it into the field of living as doing, which actually has something to do with rehabilitation of the theatrical performatives, of the defective performatives of Austin. There's actually pretty soon after Austin, in the first criticism is about this performatives that are actually declassified by himself and put aside as invalid or not valid enough or semi-valid or something that actually doesn't produce reality. So soon after, these performatives are rehabilitated by Searle and the chain of researchers that are completely kind of restoring these performatives as performatives that do things. And then Derrida states this as if deferring or disseminating it a little bit. So I think that this path that Lagai takes is the path that I would like to try to construct, and the path that actually would allow me to use the whole instrumental power of pragmatic analytics, remaining in the field of presence, but the presence as redefined by Hans Ulrich Gumbrecht, not the presence as defined in the criticism of the line Heidegger-Derrida, the presence of the classical metaphysics. So I think this direction would provide me a starting point which could put into the field of theory something that is usually a free and loose essay form, the usual form of autoethnography when it comes to arts. Something I wouldn't like to do. Describing experiences or something in a memoir type of text. So this is what I'm trying to do, to bring them together and to provide a path in which I can be, I can use these categories without being really exposed to every type of pragmatic criticism.
Thank you. Yeah, I just forgot who is your academic tutor, no, academic research director.
Professor Hristova.
Hristova. Yeah. Okay. It's of importance of my first one, more general, let's say, general question, but question remark at the same time. And one, I have also one specific question. My general remark, you know, I'm a political scientist, and when I saw directorial power is one of the main concepts of the political science. But your research is situated in what specific scientific area? Is it mostly philosophy or between philosophy and theater studies?
Yeah,
art theory?
I consider it interdisciplinary.
Okay,
yeah.
It's interdisciplinary. Wow. But you know, for different reasons, there are limitations trying to defend a thesis which is really interdisciplinary. You know, maybe it's much more difficult than the possible victory of Ukraine over Russia today. It's difficult to defend such type of thesis, interdisciplinary thesis. Well, so it was my remark and first question: in what specifics or what domain, scientific domain, you will construct your research? But my much more specific question is about the power. About violence, about question, okay? All this is within this quite polysemic concept, the power. And in this way, do you intend to mobilize a little bit, let's say, more reflection, development of your reflection and on power, trying to mobilize one philosopher? You didn't speak about this philosopher, but she, in my mind, is important to understand the power, Hannah Arendt. She has a quite original theory of the power, saying that the violence puts the end of the power. So power, in her understanding, is just something that acceptance without violence. Mm-hmm. But speaking about violence, we speak about coercion. Is it possible to have this directorial power without some coercion, however? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Pretty important one. Actually, I have a separate section in my dissertation regarding the notion of power itself, and it has its specific aspects also, because it is in Bulgarian, and the word vlast means something different sometimes, or just partially representing the concept of power. So when I speak here of the power, I left it as power, not as authority or not as some kind of other synonym, just because of the Nietzschean connection. I basically refer to the term as German language would refer to the term Macht, for example, as something that has the maximum broader, as you pointed out, meaning, and then reducing this meaning to some particular meanings regarding the mandate, regarding the something prescribed by law, regarding abuse of power, or every other type. So there's also a reflection regarding the notion of vlast in Bulgarian and regarding the notion of power, and this reflection actually gives me there in the broader research, actually gives me the possibility to distinct between these fractions of the notion, if I can put it this way. And the other question was in which field? I think at the end is going to be in the field of philosophy. This tendency is something that I cannot avoid anymore, as I started this way, and I'd rather keep it this way.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Yasser Zakhariev is my name. Thank you for your expose, Javor. I'm very far from pretending to have understood everything, but I have something particular in mind that I didn't understand, and I would like to ask you about it. In your picture of power, the directorial power, there is clearly something missing to me, and this is the text itself. What is the status of the text? And even going further, what is the role of the playwright, the author, in this game of power? How the power of the director relates to the text and of the text. Of course, there is another situation. The director might be the author as well. The playwright and the director might be the same person. And it's a different case, and it's probably even more interesting to be interpreted. So what is the role of the text in your picture and in your thesis? Thank you.
I purposefully set directorial power through speech, which actually focuses on directors' performatives, because usually directors and actors' performatives, they are performatives of speech, and the written performatives are a different matter, which is of course really important. And actually, what I'm trying to do in the broader research, especially when it comes to the tools of pragmatic analytics, I'm trying to build the interlocutionary configuration of power, starting from the very beginning. So from the first in the chain, if we of course can accept that the playwright is the first in chain, because the iteration is something that concerns him or her too. But anyway, the written performative is something that comes as a given, and the question how we deal with it is one of the main questions of what I'm trying to do. So in this regard, this complex interlocutionary situation, which has complex members, also silent members, and complications that go along the chain, and the illusions sometimes of the authors that they control the meaning by very writing the text. I know even classic playwrights who believe so. For example, Edward Dobie, he was one of the playwrights who would really think he can continue, that he can control meaning in other languages, especially when the text is translated. Martin McDonagh thinks so. He also thinks that the control of the author is really big enough. And of course, this is not exactly the situation. Here, Derrida is quite right, and dissemination there, all the paths and channels of dissemination, you cannot even count them, but this structural, so to say, structure of temporary balance between these members, so to say, of the chain is something that is actually in the area of my particular interest. Sure.
I'd like to follow the question of Docent Yasin Zakhariev, and instead of follow your theoretical argumentation, I would ask you, is it correct to say that in the case of your play Castor, you act as a playwright and as a director in the same time? So this is the same, nearly the same question.
Mm.
And if it is correct, so the part of the director, or the role of the director, does it mirrors in one way or another in the act of playwriting? So when you act as a playwright, do you think the role of the director?
No.
It is not correct?
Well, it's very hard to make such distinctions, especially when being in the position of someone who is writing something he's going to stage. So this perspective opens another perspective to the writing itself. And in this regard, I don't think this has some kind of specific character. I can try to describe it. It's going to be rather psychological, probably, description. But anyway, this is not something that can give us the idea about the general situation, which I'm trying to grasp somehow. So there's certain level of security that you have when writing something that you're going to stage, and this level of security is actually something that provides you with this very security I just discussed, the one of the author who believes really wants to save what he or she meant, as they say. And this usually leads to the concept of the director as the translator, as the translator from the page to the stage, which is the ultimate hope of the playwrights as such, not playwright directors. Which in the case of the playwright director is completely different, because then you don't have, you have nobody to blame on your way. Basically, you're responsible for everything, and then you take the responsibility. You take a holistic responsibility, so to say, which makes the situation pretty different.
some other questions or comments?
Thanks for the note. I'll take it.
There are no other questions and comments for now. We could give the floor to our second presenter of this session. And this is Natasha Nedelkova. Natasha Nedelkova is from the visual artist and researcher. She's from Skopje. But now she attends our seminar, our doctoral school, and was doctoral student at the University Paris 8. Her works are collaborative, audiovisual, and many of her works could be seen online or to have some information on them online. She has master's degree in film studies at École Normale Supérieure de Lyon, and then a degree from École Universitaire de Recherche from the Artistic Research Program in 2020. And now she is a doctoral student at the University Paris 8. So, Natasha Nedelkova, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I don't know if it's good here. Through artistic practice and experimental approaches to film theory. And yeah, first I'm gonna tell you about my background, which is the screen maybe there. The camera moves, you can see. It's not very important. So, yes, I'm a visual artist. I produce videos and performances and video installations in museums, but I did my education since I started in Skopje in the University of Fine Arts, which is very craft-oriented, and I wanted to introduce some reflective practices in my work, so I decided to make a master's degree in film studies in France. And then I found out there is something that is called research creation, artistic research, and I'm going to tell you more about that, since it's somehow the center of one of the center of my interests. Yes. So I'm a student in third year at the Doctoral School of Aesthetic Science and Technologies of the Arts at the University of Paris 8. And I am preparing under the direction of Professor Hristova and the lecturer Alice Lenné a PhD project in film studies. And yeah, so what is a PhD thesis in research creation is like the beginning of my presentation, because we know that in the recent years, we have witnessed multiplication and massification of practice-based PhD projects in the fields of visual arts, where at art schools, people are now continuing to study and to to conduct a PhD project, while at the same time, at universities, in Western Europe especially, they support the development of PhD projects in research creation. That's the how we call it in France, research creation PhD. So scientific research and artistic creation are both creative and reflexive endeavors. And the reflexive practices necessary for the production of theoretical knowledge are also creative processes, while at the same time, many artistic projects are adopting methodologies of scientific research that result in hybrid forms of process-based and experimental both research and creation. The historical context is widely known because we know that since the beginning of what we call art history, in the period of Renaissance in Italy in the 15th century, the artistic practices go hand in hand, go together, where the production of knowledge and the production of art are seen as mutually constructive practices. We can see that in the example of Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo or Alberti. Later, in the 20th century, examples such as Bauhaus movement in the 20s in Europe tried to imagine a unity of all arts, or some avant-garde artistic practices like Dadaism or Surrealism. They both were interested in art and text and production of knowledge. But I'm trying to situate the context of artistic research or PhD projects in research creation with the help of an article. I'm gonna tell you more about it, of a French art historian that is, in her opinion, like this, the current modes of production of artistic knowledge she's trying to locate it in the late 40s and the late 50s in the United States of America, in the period of what people call McCarthy era, but I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to just follow my presentation. Why artistic research is necessary? I'm convinced personally that it is, and as I'm convinced that research creation invites embodied, reflexive thought experiments. So both theoretical and that means that PhD in research creation, that means that both the research part and the creation part are equally important, and they nourish each other in an important way. And it would be not to justify a practice by some artist where he would be trying to do some theory, or to justify his theory by doing a creation work of creation, but to nourish theory with practical creation and inform practice by theoretical analysis. So it would be not to show that we are like perfectly in capacity of doing both theory and artistic production, but to do some kind of to find some approach that would, where the two would inform each other and in the production of research and creation. My idea and my research by now, they would propose that artistic research can help us to break with a vision where artists take themselves as the source of artistic creation, which would be a kind of infinite introspection in favor of a processual and experimental approach, where instead of producing objects, the focus is made on producing connections and reflecting on the current world we're in, socially engaged approach, which is also an interdisciplinary approach because it is a collaboration between artists and scientists from different domains. It is a recurrent practice in French universities in the last 10 years, where the idea is to break with the, yes, so this I already said. And then what is important about this kind of PhD project is that they apply some experimental protocols and they call for surveys and they propose prototypes, but dealing with artistic projects and creations, where the object is not so important, but the process and the interdisciplinary aspect. So it is different, in my opinion. The PhD projects that are happening in the art schools are different because they are mostly interested in the practical approach and the creative practice of the artist, as they are like on continuation because somehow in art schools, it's if we can somehow make it more simple, in art school is the practice which is a bit more important, and in university is the theoretical part which is more important, but the university is making much more efforts to share to be like to take these both aspects seriously. And so yes, the idea is that artistic research is different than scientific production of knowledge, because scientific production of knowledge needs to be like repetitive and but at the same time artistic research projects are very much singular, and that would be the main difference because between the two approaches. But some general lines are remarkable in regards to the approaches of PhD practice-based research proposals, both in the university and in art schools. Because for example, I don't know how it is here, but in France, art schools are separated from university, and they are like other institutions, École des Beaux-Arts. And here, I mean, in Macedonia, North Macedonia, where I come from, it's university, the art school is under university. I don't know. Maybe I think it's the same in another places in the region. Maybe here it's the same. But what is the most important is that this new kind of PhD practice-based research are not so interested in the traditional craft object producing, artwork producing, modernist approach to artistic creation, but so they will not be so interested in general in the subjective endeavors of the artist, but they would be interested in process-based, interdisciplinary, and experimental approaches. And an equivalent in the field of literature would be practices such as speculative theory, author theory, and speculative fiction. And then I would try to contextualize the artistic research in regards to some historical apparitions of important examples, and then I would try to develop what I mean by singular methodologies. And at the end, I would present you my project, and which is because I'm actually working on a project in artistic creation in film studies. So the French art historian Sandra Delacour published an article entitled "The Artist Researcher, or When Social Science Becomes Form" in 2019. And she situates the emergence of these practices in the McCarthy era in the United States of America, or in the late 40s and 50s of the 20th century, an epoch marked by the purge of left-wing and socialist sympathizers in the universities in the United States of America. Her analysis positions these turning points where artists integrate research positions at the university as a landmark in the political history of knowledge. The guiding principle for the integration of artists in universities was to widen and extend the creative aspect of research, as the title of her article indicates. When social science becomes form, or to give more importance to the form of the research than to its font, like on its basics. So between the year of 1938 and 1945, a radical transformation operates in the scientific production in the USA, a reform in higher education in the Second World War, where researchers accept to engage to military and government's efforts in the revision of its practices. Art allows science to be taught, but also guarantees the expression of individual freedom and sets up a guide for the research community. Between the 45 and 65, I'm citing this Sandra Nedelkova article. The involvement of scientists in the defense of national interest is getting stronger. Anxious to consolidate its worldwide scientific domination, the United States worked up to develop a typically American research model born of the alliance between fundamental research, capitalism, and public patronage. Later on in her article, Sandra Nedelkova notes, the subject of a new craze, as evidenced by the proliferation of creative doctorates, and is credited with a more sensitive and emotional interpretation of the facts. In the period of the 1970s to the 1990s, the figure of artist and researcher became an international phenomenon, while at the same time, higher education and research institutions continued to move in a direction of its liberalization. At the beginning of 2000, the simultaneous valorization of creative research and the figure of the artist researcher is becoming even more closely associated as the focus of knowledge production shifts from university laboratories to recent but powerful cognitive industries. Moreover, Sandra Nedelkova points at the use of big data that now takes the role of production of knowledge in real time on individuals and society, and to inflect the analysis of metadata according to scientific criteria guarded in the name of economic secrecy. I'm citing the article of Sandra Nedelkova, long sidelined by Cartesian categories of thought. The figure of the artist has asserted itself as an analog of the researcher in a specific context, one in which the production of knowledge has become a global economic issue and has seen the birth of cognitive capitalism. This critique of the history of the artistic research is balanced by numerous examples that takes highly socially engaged position in order to question the specific structures of social domination. Artists such as Donald Judd, Ad Reinhardt, and Nancy Prophet approached research as a territory of struggle and as a form of resistance, and they seized upon the tools and objects of the social sciences as an instrument of individual and collective emancipation. These artists are aware that the social scientists contribute to designing what within humanity is authorized to manifest itself, to be deciphered as a signifier and designated as an object and subject of knowledge. And they refute any monopolistic or conclusive approach to their practice. So I would continue with the second part, which is art, considering art as a reflective practice. The philosopher and media theorist Dieter Mersch, in his article Art, Knowledge, and Reflexivity, distinguished the artistic modes of production from the ones of scientific modes of production, because he stated that art has its own way of thinking, where research is not a goal-oriented activity, but emerges from an open-ended search without being bound to gaining results. So I will cite his article of art, knowledge, and reflexivity. He says, art doesn't work with concepts or propositions, or it doesn't need any theory or general model or ways of verifying theses and making them valid. There is also no method to follow, nor does art depend on public justification through critique. Rather, art is based in practices that let something appear and make it perceivable, and by doing so, producing new insights. Hence, artistic cognition and recognition is not based in logic, but in certain non-discursive media languages, which allow for non-propositional reflections on their own structure and limitation, using actions, performances, images, material objects, compositions, and montage, or multimedia installations that go against the grain in order to push perceptibility to its limits where contradictions become apparent. In this article, the main difference between scientific research and knowledge production through practice would be in the prefix from research. And what would stay for the art would be search, because he explains that the in research for science would be a scientific research that has to establish a precise procedure that would be verifiable, easy to repeat to anyone interested, while the knowledge production through an artistic practice offers singular models of developing truth that are different for every artist and for every artistic project. In the contrast to scientific heuristics, art is based on fundamental openings, which includes openness to the unknown or unexpected, into which it is drawn and in which it allows the searcher herself to become entangled. Thus, artistic research is always in becoming, a bold adventure. It addresses the artist's life, his or her own imagination, and seeks to transform his or her own being in the world, or his or her entire mode or understanding, thinking, and acting. My project is in the domain of film studies, and it consists of a written dissertation entitled Performing the Masks, Poetics of Self-Representation of Face and Body in Cinema, and a documentary film entitled Atlas of Post-Optical Gazes. My PhD project would be like the theoretical part would consist of a production of a written text of around 350 pages on the topic of self-representation as a tool for social critiques in the works of three contemporary filmmakers, Hristova, Harun Faruqi, and Elias Suleiman. And the practical part would be a creation of a documentary film that focuses on computer vision in relation to facial recognition software. In my artistic practice, as well as in the academic research, both film theory and visual art are important and nourish themselves. My theoretical work is highly influenced by my artistic practice, and my art projects are informed by my interest in film theory. In the junction of these two separate domains of research, film theory and visual art, working both with images and texts can unveil a new dimension of these traditionally separate fields. The digital revolution that marked the end of the 1990s induced an unprecedented merging of text and images through the figure of fleeting images on digital screens. The electronic and digital culture of images to a temporal digital interface with binary code of units. Form temporarily mosaic images, to cite William Flusser from his famous book from 1985. That is valid both for visualization of text and image. So in this new universe of pixelized digital images, In regards to the topic of the documentary film that I'm working on, actually, why computer vision? Why computer vision? Computer vision is when automated operations are trying to recognize shapes and forms in images, in digital images or videos via an algorithm. Because computer vision, it contributes to it is somehow behind in what is coming, somehow I'm trying to grasp the new visual culture and how contemporary digital culture moves away from the optical regime of image production into a computational or post-optical one. Because of the electronic and digital image production by TV, video, and now participatory internet Web 2.2, we are somehow more into this, we are participating somehow in the production of post-optical images, which is where the image is calculated also, produced by programs, and it's programmable. And also, I'm very much interested in the influence of self-image and the extraction of personal information for surveillance and targeted marketing. We know that there's a widespread interest now in surveillance studies, and I'm interested to incorporate this into my practice, while at the same time I'm working with self-image and self-representation. And I'm interested in the modes of production of subjectivity after this post-optical regime of images. So new digital image technologies would no longer imitate the human eye, but would perform complex calculation within machine learning systems. And cinema, the art of seeing, the art of the non-human machine eye, can develop an analytical and observational approach to computer vision. And some of the questions would concern what might be the place and the role of the self-image in these contemporary conditions where the post-optical image technology exceeds the capacities and the functions of human perception. And the main idea behind my theoretical part of my research is that these three artists, Gitta Steyer, she's a German contemporary artist, also filmmaker, and Arun Farocki, a very famous German documentary filmmaker that contextualized the idea of operational image, that he was one of the first to show us that images no longer serve as a representation, but as they produce actions and guide missiles, for example, in drones. And Elias Suleiman is a Palestinian director that is making always critical films, especially regarding the situation in Palestine, but also in regards to the visual visual organization of bodies in contemporary society. And then, yes, the problematics would be, how can self-representation in cinema be a tool for coming face-to-face with the mechanisms of the power of the visual, where face and body put themselves in front of recording devices with the aim of establishing a gaze on what is invisible, concealed, or difficult to see. Putting oneself in the image, aiming one's own gaze, and sharing it with spectators is a long-standing practice that has marked cinema burlesque in particular. The contemporary constellation of the hybrid visual, half optical and computational like any digital camera, and post-optical, any camera connected to algorithmic software, notably that attached to our smartphones, culminating in the widespread practice of selfies, the creation of our online avatars, just as faces become our algorithmic triangular masks under facial recognition systems. However, filmmakers that I just mentioned Hito Shtayer, Arun Faruqi, and Elias Suleiman, are using their own body and gaze put in film to try to engage with the contemporary world of images and their future. They are analyzing the work of images through their mise-en-scène of the self in film. The singularity of a gaze brought to the screen enables us to establish a close relationship with the social and political effects of the new modalities, can help us to establish a close relationship with the social and political effects of the new modalities of post-optical vision. That would be like my idea and my contribution to the topic. And then I will show you an extract, because the main idea is to show that somehow self-documentation and self-representation can be a response to the financialization logics that are where everybody is somehow trying to measure its own value and so. But I'm using it in this work, which is entitled Identity Tissues, in a much more different way than this entrepreneurial logics, because I'm using self-representation as a social critique, but also as a therapeutical tool, because maybe you know that Skopje is my city of origin. It became very much changed in the recent past with the project Skopje 2014, which was the project conducted by VMRO DPMNE, the political party under which influence I grown up. So I'm talking about my identity tissues because I had trouble to identify with this regime. And this video, so it's a video work of 12 minutes and 26 seconds, and it was exhibited at Manifesta 14, and you can watch it entirely on Vimeo. And the idea is to question how can the historical roots of the masks be reflected in our present moment. In this video, I put myself on stage using different masks in order to question the links between identity, memory, and visual perception. By adopting a confessional prism, I try to point out to the implicit transition that the voice, the rhythm, the frame, and the mask can produce as therapeutic temporality. I asked the question of the formation of my own subjectivity, having undergone the architectural transformation of my hometown, Skopje, North Macedonia, in the recent past. The project, entitled Skopje 2014, masked the modernist city of Skopje, the architectural project of Kenzo Tange, one famous architect from Japan, into a wonderland of neoclassicist fantasy. And I'll show you an extract from this video.
I have no identity. I have identity issues. I have to ask, what is with my terrible feelings? It's not from the Balkans, but from Bosnian society. All the jokes we ever said have Bosnian protagonists like me and Past. And they might also have identity issues, but it's just an assumption. I have no identity, but it has nothing to do with the fact that my country changed the name recently. I don't really care. They just added no in everything. Violent change affects me by the fact that my city changed its face drastically. Painful, violent, face confrontation, but the body rejected it and became a dead meat from a dead person, a dead mass with cheap identity. Project Skopje 2014 story. The CGI plan I saw in 2012 made me burst into laughter and fear. I shall fear not doing that. I shall do nothing and stop the unimaginable. I'm not ashamed anymore. it really looks impossible. It looks impossible. At best, it looks as a cheap police step or a cheap position. The urge to do this comes from a suppressed experience. The biggest part of my youth really knew exercising and lived under a very national experience. But it was no one enough. It was criminalism, a wicked one, doing everything wrong, but he wouldn't say so. I had trouble to identify with because of the total economic and structural insignificance of my country. It became the origin of the world for us. The national television showed us top videos of Macedonian celebrities accompanied with serious voices that stated Macedon, honesty, the tourism in the region is the father of God. I decided to hide behind things until the end of time because of shame from my family. But my father died, and I felt his hand. He said to me, no more lies.
Thank you. I would finish here because I did more than time. And yes, thank you.
Thank you, Natasha Nedelkova, for presenting us the whole your PhD project. And now there are so many questions, but this is a time from questions and comments, please. Dear colleagues.
I'm Patya Alexandrova, and I teach history of cinema. And I have many questions, but I put here only 2 of them. The first one is about you beginning somewhere in the middle of the 20th century, and I don't understand why. Because when you talk about this relation between artistic research and theoretical research, maybe you may use it from 20s. In 20th century, Germain Dulac, Louis Deluc in France, or Soviet montage theories by Eisenstein and others, Rudolf-Kind, and even you quoted here Dziga Vertov, and I wonder why you talk when you choose middle of the century and after that. And the second question is about this kind of dichotomy between artistic and theoretical research. Can you explain, for example, Eisenstein theories? Is it artistic research or is it cinema theoretical research? And other question is about your PhD thesis. I didn't understand the connection between this part of 350 pages and your film documentary and your documentary. Are both on the same topic or on the different topic? I don't understand this mix of your works together.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. I started with, because I I'm since many years trying to understand what actually is happening, what actually is going on with this PhD in research creation, because it's different. It's different in art schools. It's different in university. And I found an article which is very critical about this research creation, and it is Sandra Delacour's article about research creation, where she's saying that yes, maybe I'm sure there are many different examples from the 20s in cinema and also in art where artists are producing knowledge, but what she's thinking about the institutionalization of artistic research is also a critique to be critically approached because of use to say science should be creative. We should find very creative ways to produce knowledge instead of critically examining the existing reality. And this was her critique of artistic research. Then it's very different because yes, she is saying that in the 40s and 50s, artists were invited at universities because they fired out many people that were interested in leftist ideologies, and they made like a purge, witch hunt, she says, and they put some artists as artists would be some figure of a temporal and apolitical approach, and this why she is critical about artistic research. But in the same time, we have many examples where artists are doing artistic research in a very reflexive and socially engaged way. And yes, my project would be to make a theoretical dissertation on the work of 3 artists, filmmakers, that are, 2 of them, Arun Faruqi and Itor Steyer. They are producing books, I mean, written text. They are also and their text would be somewhere between social critique and media studies and film theory. So they are producers of texts and they are producers of films. And Ilya Suleiman is not directly like researcher, but he has a very textual practice because he's always writing in his films. And I would try to make a theoretical research, I mean, film analysis based and image analysis on the work of these 3 filmmakers independently of my film, which is in computer vision. I would try to understand what is computer vision and there is somehow a connection because the filmmakers that I study, they are all trying to see how images work. And I'm trying to see how computer vision work because no one understands it. And even like applied because it's complicated even for informaticians, but also I'm trying to use this artistic research and collaborative approach with scientists and try to make a film about computer vision. Yes, that would be my answer. Thank you.
I'm asking where are the limits of the possible examples in observation? Because we all know that the creation is always a research, and the research, the main objectivity of any research is in creation. And the notions of art and science nowadays are melting. And you said that in your program. So if you take any examples from the 18th century, 19th century researches on the colors, on the light, etc., etc. There are researches in scientific field as well. The research on the light and colors of the earth or any other. And from the mainstreaming researches only in the field of political and social activities. We mean also other fields of sciences, because your topic on the vision and why computer vision, it is not, there are some social aspects, but it is not only the social part which is interesting for you as far as history.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. I would say that, yes, the limits of research creation or artistic research would be that they are, yes, I mean, research is always a creation, but research in institution wants to show itself as objective and as absolute truth. It doesn't, it has trouble to identify its creative and constructive and constructed nature. And creation, on the other hand, has difficulties with showing itself as a collaborative process and influenced by the real social, historical, political, economical aspects of the real. And it has to, sometimes we have the impression that an artist is a genius that wants to, that like creates something out of nothing. So the artistic research can somehow, although it was, its proliferation was somehow, I mean, yes, I understand. But yes, why computer vision? Because computer vision is, in a way, teaching the machine to look. And cinema would be looking with a machinic eye, looking with something else. And optical regime would be a regime where we have some approach aspect, I mean, we have something with the objective world that can be seen with the mediation of images by the lens, which is also a scientific invention, but it has something of a trace, something like an imprint, while computer vision and post-optical regime would be like a very much abandonment of this regime in order to construct it. It's like an artificial vision, which is also like the image is calculated, the image is produced, the image has lost the trace of with the real, but also it's problematic because the image, the trace of the real with the image was always a mediation and construction. So it was always artificial. But the interest, what interests me most is the dangers between that arise from this computational regime, the potential dangers, and because the technology is like a pharmacon, it has highly emancipatory potentials and highly destructive, and especially when we talk about algorithms, that now this is coming clear. And why? Yes, because I don't want to make a dissertation about my artistic work, or I wanted to make a collaborative approach with scientists in computer vision and theoretical approach of highly politically engaged filmmakers. Like my theory is studying this politically engaged, I mean, by art filmmakers, and my film would be a collaborative work with engineers and people that from applied mathematics and informatics, just to see what can be made out of it.
So, thank you. Thank you to Natasha Nedelkova. Sorry, I didn't. There are some more questions.
Thank you. My question concerns the gender specificity of the choice of your artists for your theoretical part. And the second question, continuing the first one, is the specificity of this computer vision on the gender. Could you define the gender specificity of computer vision in case of this possible at all? Oh, Maria Zhukova, University of Constance, Slavic Department.
Thank you for your question. Well, gender specificity of my choice of filmmakers would be, in regards to the topic, I found the work of the filmmaker Hristova, as she has a materialist and feminist approach, which is very interesting for me. So I'm interested to talk about some other feminist materialist approaches to theory and to film studies. And computer vision, I still haven't accomplished my collaboration with scientists to try to understand, but for the moment, I haven't thought about it. But I thank you for this question that I will start to think about. I will imply in my research. Thank you.
I have just kind of sample question. Always your topic that you presented here is still on the margins of the mainstream cinema production, or the money goes also in this direction of sponsoring kind of researching by the cineast of the films, like you said, of these connections between scientific, aesthetic research and film creation, or it's just stay somehow in the scientific world. And well, what would you think about it? That's probably a kind of a rhetorical question.
Sorry, just for the record, could you please present me?
Maria Golik, a doctoral student of the University.
Thank you, Maria, for your question. It's different. Mainly money goes to mainstream cinema. That's no one is surprised. And in my, in the three filmmakers, the films of Elias Suleiman are funded by many centers, because it is like somehow a film of RSA, what we call a film that goes, that are films that are shown at Cannes festivals and other very, very important festivals for mainstream cinema, but artistic mainstream, not like Netflix. And so it would be like he would be funded by state agency for production of films. And Hristova, she would be university researcher and also very much funded by private institutions like contemporary art world, because and also cultural institutions, like, for example, she had a huge retrospective in Centre Pompidou recently, and she has many exhibitions in a very famous art exhibition centers. So her work would be much more publicly and privately funded in the context of contemporary art. And Arun Faruqi, he started his career as a filmmaker, but it didn't went so well. So he shifted to television and production of documentary films for television. And then at the end of the 80s, he migrated to the domain of contemporary art, and some of his latest installations and productions are financed by contemporary art institutions. So yes, somehow it is between public and private, and between university, museums, and film agencies.
Natasha, my name is Kalina Hristova. I'm an artist and also head of fine art department in New Bulgarian University. My question is a bit different and maybe we'll change a bit the topic. It's about the presentation, and maybe because I'm an artist and also a designer, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned so many times in your presentation the word image and image and image, and you almost didn't have any image in your presentation. Is that on some certain purpose, or why you're doing this? Usually we don't have enough time for the presentation, but as a visual artist, you're obliged to, I don't know, to do something, to be honest and develop the visual culture, which you will pretend to do with your art and your future movie. This is my question, because, and this is also an advice, of course, because the presentations are important. And as you know, one image is spoken as 100 or 1,000 words. Thank you in advance for your question.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for your question. I didn't use images because I didn't know how exactly to show what I wanted to talk about, like research creation. That's why I decided to show a part of my video, and also to come back to this to come back to this idea that I developed in the presentation in regards to the work of William Flusser from the Universe of Technical Images that he wrote in 1985. In this book, he says that there would be a merge between image and text when image becomes technical and digital, because it would be, we would come back to somehow a magical reality when images become like moving so fast, and there would be no difference between image and text. So in a way, if I try to, I thank you very much, and I take note to I could have shown you images to make it more clear the work of the filmmakers I study. But if I try to go to the delirium of William Flusser, I would say that in his opinion, like PowerPoint presentation with text can be considered as an image because of the material aspect of code, which is 0101, exactly the same as a digital image. So it would be no ontological difference between image and text presentation in this kind of context of PowerPoint presentation. It could be considered as images on an ontological level, but they are not images because on a representational level they are not. But thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. We could continue with our comments outside this session. So now I'd like to thank to Javor Gardev, to Natasha Nedelkova, and to all the participants of this first part of the session, and to give the floor to Kalina Hristova and her PhD student.
Thank you very much, Professor Genova. I'll start with something because as Professor Vasov already mentioned, our colleague Ivan Bogdanov is not here today to present his topic, but it's really interesting, and I feel obliged to introduce him with a few words, because we are working closely in our BA program in graphic and illustration. Ivan is also one of the main teachers and leading teachers in animation program in New Bulgarian University, and he is taking a really very important part in the educational process in this program, and also in some of the art departments in the university. I wanted to say something about his education and what he is doing in the field of animation in Bulgaria, which I found very important. First of all, Ivan graduated in media and animation from the Willem de Kooning Academy of Art and Design in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. In 2004, he founded the production company FinFilm, where he worked as freelancer, illustrator, animator, director, and producer. And later in 2008, together with his wife, Vesela Dancheva, and their colleague, Maria Stanisheva, he found another film production company, Kompot Collective. He's still working in it as a director, art director, illustrator, and animator. And as his colleague, I can assure you that Ivan is a great animator and a great artist. I will proceed to the theme of the session and give the floor to the second participant, who is Ivailo Saraleyski from New Bulgarian University. Ivailo already finished his dissertation and it's awaiting pre-defense in the Department of Fine Arts. But Ivailo, if you can hear us, you can present your topic. The topic is the clash between art created by humans and AI-generated art.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. First of all, I hope you will accept my apologies that I'm not there with you, but I wasn't able to come. And my name is Ivailo Saraleyski. Most of you know me from last year's conference. And the study of my PhD is about the symbolism in tarot and their transformation in contemporary art. So my thesis explores the origins of tarot, covering the emergence of playing cards in Europe and the development of tarot over the centuries. Also, I analyzed the meaning, symbolism, and iconography of tarot, focusing on the major arcane and the minor arcane suits. And the focus is the connection between tarot and artificial intelligence. Today, I'm going to talk about the clash between art created by humans and AI-generated art. And I'm going to start with computers are nothing new to art historical research. Since at least the 60s, computer technology has been incorporated into collections management, at first implicitly informing and within a decade explicitly impacting art historical methods. Whether digitalized or digital, art history as a discipline is largely unthinkable today without at least some resource to computing. From the most mundane task of word processing and PowerPoint creation to advanced research that makes use of GIS and multispectral imaging. Since the turn of the present century, the field has benefited from the perspectives of art historians who are trained in the digital humanities and their use of computational techniques that open new paths of inquiry. Art historians are increasingly using artificial intelligence, particularly machine learning, to study historical artwork. This approach allows for a fresh perspective on the objectives themselves, shifting from previous uses of digital tools for contextual analysis. AI is now being applied directly to the artworks, utilizing computer vision to analyze and manipulate data, revealing potential statistical patterns that offer new understandings. Collaboration between art and computer is actively developing project focused on analyzing artworks themselves. What follows are 8 axioms that I hope will inform the future relationship between AI and art. I formulate these axioms primarily in the hope that art historians interested in pursuing research that employs AI will consider them before embarking on a new project. But I also hope that these axioms will find their way to computer scientists interested in working with images. The first axiom is the history of art is not a problem to be solved. AI and machine learning have benefited humans in areas like medical diagnosis, climate changes, though there are limitations and concerns. However, art historical inquiry is different, focusing on appreciating the creativity of the past rather than solving problems. Understanding art in its historical context requires humanity and a desire to learn. The second axiom is scale is not an unqualified good. AI's application to works of art is often justified by idea of scaling the discipline. This concept, borrowed from the tech industry, refers to the ability of computer products to handle exponentially high volumes. AI is seen as a solution, the challenge of cataloging numerous obscure objects in underfunded museums and cultural institutions. Machine learning is expected to create basic indexes quickly, making these materials available for further study. However, these applications can perpetuate existing norms and unexamined assumptions, such as assigning subjects, headings, and iconography. AI systems rely on past patterns, carrying them into the future. This is problematic at a time when critical archival studies call for scrutiny and concrete steps to address harm. While proponents argue for smoothness and efficiency in art historical research, I believe productive thought often arises from function. Axiom 3, artworks are not pixels, pixels are not artworks. In the last generation or so, more and more artists have made works that are born digital, and NFTs are now gathering serious attention from art markets. Moreover, in 2022, DALL-E, Lensa, and Midjourney have availed to millions of people the capacity to generate images using artificial intelligence. These sorts of image generation tools have raised important issues about intellectual property, creativity, and equity, which require a serious discussion, but one that veers away from our present focus. However, these image generators do highlight by contrast an important, if basic point, when dealing with works of art that were not born digital. The transformation of these works of art into computational data requires a fundamentality transformational process of technological mediation. Old master paintings are not just clever patterns of pixels. As one research has suggested, they are material objects that record moments of human creativity in malleable materials and degrade over time. The question of whether digital surrogates enable meaningful art historical queries remains open. Transforming works of art into data shift the focus away from the art itself. While projects using neural networks can identify pigments in manuscripts illuminations, they provide information to scholars rather than direct answers to questions. Axiom 4, artificial intelligence and machine learning will reinscribe existing hierarchies rather than challenge them. Oops. Art is currently treated as just another data set for computer scientists alongside MRI scans, surveys, and weather patterns. However, AI relies on scale favors, categorized and readily available data, overlooking the institutional history of database formation. The allocation of resources in art history and museology has traditionally focused on European centers, leading to an abundance of data from those areas. This data is not representative of object historical reality. Digital projects risk reinforcing the importance of certain fields simply because that's where the data is. There is a concern that computers will solidify hierarchies that previously generations have sought to challenge. Axiom 5, it is important to know the difference between what humans do well and what computers do well. Computers excel in fast and accurate calculations, but utility of their calculations depends on the project. AI can make mistakes misdefined object of providing nonsensical answers, revealing gaps in rule-based systems. However, AI is not wrong in a meaningful sense. It simply provides a solution based on what technologists ask of it. Computers represent the world according to human perspectives and do not fully grasp humanities, ethical and ontological complexities. Human judgment is crucial in art, historical research, projects involving AI to uphold ethical and cultural commitments. The real issue lies in how humans use computers, often overlooking the translation of the real-world phenomena into computable data. Without understanding the statistical probabilities of machine learning, caution should be exercised in drawing strong conclusions. Axiom 6. We need guidelines for the use of AI in art and art history. Certainly, there are no universally accepted standards for ethically informed research at the intersection of historical images and AI. Historical data used to train AI systems carries the basis of previous collectors and catalogers, including racism, sexism, and colonial views. To navigate potential harm arising from base data, guidelines should be established for researchers in the field. While historical data and images are not treated as human subjects, ethical imperfections still exist. These guidelines should address issues such as research sample size based on major museums and the potential negative implications of the research. Axiom 7, machine learning can change how we see the historical record, but it cannot complete the historical record. It is spectacular of using machine learning to complete lost work of art, inscriptions. Traditional art historians have proposed reconstructions based on meticulous study, often with competition interpretations. Auditioning such proposal as challenging as there is ground truth to compare with. Algorithmic examination of images can prioritize competition and formal properties over socio-historical context. Computational techniques can aid historical reconstructions when used responsibly by trained specialists. However, the black box nature of machine learning hinders audition, leading us to remain skeptical of AI/ML's utility in reconstruction lost or damaged artworks. Axiom 8, can do does not mean should do. Curiosity doesn't always require action. Some experiments can have insidious effects by appearing actionable. Computer technology offers potential for new perspectives in art history, but guidelines are needed to avoid unifying them harm. Funding pressures might lead to the pursuit of outputs, even if an experiment fails, masking the need for refinement. Investigating correlations like pseudonymy and trustworthiness using historical artworks perpetuates harmful stereotypes. Researchers must consider the implications of their curiosity and avoid maintaining funding rhetoric. Those scholars working at the intersection of art history and digital techniques have confronted these issues for well over a decade. We have yet to encounter a concise statement of these concerns. I offer these axioms in the hope that they can become part of institutional and curricular conversations about the role of AI in art historical research. Pragmatically, these axioms might foster conversation in the classroom where discussions of the digital area already is an important part of art historical pedagogy. They might be taken under advisement in productive guidelines for best practices by the relevant scholarly societies. It is our conviction that people interested in operating in this space will benefit from discussing the axioms with their interdisciplinary teams in advance of committing to a particular application of AI to a body of art. I hope that scholars will enter these conversations with genuine curiosity and generosity, rather with a mindset of defending research projects already underway. Only in this way can scholars have a genuine conversation about what kinds of research questions can be asked productively, what can be asked ethically, and how to make this question appealing to funding agencies without promising overblown or historical dubious results. AI is simply too powerful and important to assimilate unthinkingly into what we do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ivailo. I want to remind you just to present a little bit the theme of your dissertation and say something more about it. And of course, after that, we can continue to your questions.
Okay. The first chapter is historiographical, and it's devoted to the origins of the tarot. It is divided into 7 smaller parts. The first of these explores the emergence of playing cards, both the so-called ordinary decks and the tarot decks in Europe. The following 6 parts trace the development of the tarot over the centuries in close relation to the historical, cultural, and artistical context of the eras. Chapter 2 focuses on the analysis of the meaning, symbolism, semiotics, and iconography of tarot. And the third chapter seeks and finds the relationship between the tarot and artificial intelligence. And what is the difference between classic tarot cards and tarot generated by AI? And I think last year I told it, but I created a AI generated tarot mixed from other 2 tarot decks. But right now I don't have it on this presentation. And I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivailo. And now to the audience, if you have any questions to Ivailo, Professor Genova.
Ivailo, I'm very interested in the topics you expose to us today, to this public, and that's why I have the question, what is the research milieu, the milieu of publications of your presentation of today? So nowadays, you know that this is a huge debate, a huge discussion with very many voices from different fields, scientific and from the practical fields as well. What are the voices was interesting for you for this topic? So if you could tell us some names, some references, articles, or I don't know, books for your research.
For the research today?
Yes. Yeah.
Just a moment. Thank you for the question. Well, it's interesting because nowadays art is changing pretty fast. Ultimately, the choice between art made by human and art generated by AI, I think, depends on the individual preferences and intentions. And it's connected with my thesis because the tarot cards are a piece of art, not only an esoterical instrument, but mostly a piece of art. And art made by human continues to inspire and captivate, though its techniques, symbolism, interpretive, the depth and human connection. Meanwhile, AI-generated art contribute to the evolving landscape of art. And that's why that theme is so interesting, because probably I need to make a deeper research to understand what is more, what people find more interesting. Did I answer your questions? Excuse me.
In a way, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there is another question.
Thank you, Ivailo, for your presentation. I would be interested to ask you if you would be treating the link that connects tarot. If I mean tarot as an esoteric, like this tarot card that when you can read the future, this tarot. Yes. I think it's very interesting to combine these two approaches of AI-generated images and tarot, but because also somehow tarot cards are serve in a way to show you the future, like to give you what will happen with your love life or something in the next future. And then AI-generated images are taking part of this world of computational regimes of creation of, I don't know, somehow models for direction of the society that is based on prevision of the future. Somehow there is this link between the prevision of the future of this computational capitalism and in the tarot cards. So what would you say about the links between the way to use image-based, which is tarot, which is somehow, I don't know where is their origin, but I think it's medieval times, and the new image production, which are very much more contemporary and algorithmic. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Tarot changes a lot through the years, just as the history of art. So probably if you look more tarot as a piece of art and forget about the esoterical instrument, because in history, at first, tarot is not an esoterical instrument. It's only a piece of art or a game to play with. And the interesting part here is that seeing tarot only as a piece of art makes easy to connect with history of art. And lots of decks are created. Lots of decks generated by AI are created. So tarot is something like, not like, tarot is a thing that changes through time, just as art. Does this answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
No, there is another question.
Yeah, just a brief one. My name is Hristova. I'm with the Department of Political Science, and I never really gave it much thought until now. But I was wondering, while I was listening, talking about the future, there is supposed to be something giving legitimacy to the tarot cards. You know, in order to be reading the future, someone should be, giving this power to the cards, or to the reader of the cards. I'm not sure how it works. So you can elaborate if you have some knowledge on that. But how do we translate this into AI? I mean, if the AI starts generating tarot cards, where would the legitimacy will be coming from? And who is going to be the reader of the future through those generated images? I'm not sure whether my question makes sense, but yeah, just wondering.
Thank you for.
Ivailo, before you answer the question, I need to remind the team of this part of the session, and the second part of it, an ethical perspective. Maybe Hristo wanted also to connect his question with the ethical. Where is the this? I want just to continue the question of Hristo. Where is the ethic moment? Who will read this generated from the AI cards? Who will read our future? If I can ask the question like that.
Thank you for the questions. First of all, there are lots of books about tarot, reading the symbols, turning you into expert of tarot. And AI generated tarot cards are just like AI generated paintings, not paintings, sorry, art pieces. So if you write to the AI generator to put the symbols from a classical tarot into an image, it will create a perfectly readable card. And for example, if the card is the Lovers, if we generate a card with written the Lovers with symbols that shows happy people in a relationship or something else, the AI generator will make it. So if I want to see someone else's future and I see this card, I will read the symbols and I will know that this is a card. How are we who is gonna see the future in the future? I don't know that. Probably it's gonna be a problem if we move into the metaverse and AI is showing us our future through tarot cards.
Okay, thank you for your answers. Is there another questions? No. Thank you very much for your attention, and that is all for today's session. And I hope to have a nice evening, everybody, and see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.